الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما ثم أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. I always begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and thanking Him and appreciating Him. Because when we feel like things are going well, when we feel like things are smooth and things are going well at work, or we don't have any trouble with our family or with our friends, those times of ease, we thank Allah for those times because we recognize that without Allah that would not have been possible. That ease, it's not because of us, it's not because we're so clever or we're such pleasant people to be around. That ease in our relationships and in our work is a blessing that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's something that He could also take away at any moment. So while we have that blessing, we thank Allah and we appreciate Him when things are going well. But when things aren't going so well, when we feel like things at work maybe are a little bit frustrating or going through some issues with a close friend or family member and we just feel like frustrated and bothered and we're not sure why this is happening, in those moments when we feel frustration, as believers, we should also be people who thank Allah and appreciate Him for those times too. Because it might not seem easier, it might not seem pleasant in the moment, but as believers we know that Allah is the all-knowing, Allah is the all-wise, and that Allah would only put that difficulty in our lives for some sort of benefit, for something that's going to help us. It may take us a while, it might take a few days or a few weeks, maybe even years, or maybe we'll never see the benefit of that hardship in this life, that Allah will reveal it to us in the hereafter. But at the end of the day, we always know that if I'm going through something difficult or difficult times, that is something that Allah put in my way. So that's something I need to thank Allah for and try to learn from. Perhaps Allah is trying to put us in touch with someone we wouldn't have reached out to otherwise, or help us learn something about ourselves. So when we're in times of difficulty, we thank Allah and we praise Him for those times too. So that's the beautiful affair of a believer. When they're in good times, they thank Allah. And when times are difficult, they thank Allah as well. So they're always benefiting and always growing. There's a beautiful hadith narrated in Jami' at-Tirmidhi by Abu Hurairah that the Prophet ﷺ was asked, based on what things will the most people be entered into Jannah. So he's asking that, or the Sahaba, they're asking that what things are going to be like the basis of the most people entering Jannah on the Day of Judgment. So the Prophet ﷺ gave an intriguing response, where he said, Taqwallah wa husn al-khuluq. He said, first of all, Taqwallah, of course, like being conscious of Allah, protecting ourselves from being somewhere that Allah doesn't want us to be. That's the first thing that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. That makes a lot of sense. But what's particularly interesting and what I wanted to spend our time together today talking about is this second piece. That the Prophet ﷺ tells us that one of the things that will be the reason why a large majority of the people in Jannah reach that place is because of husn al-khuluq, of beautiful character and beautiful dealings. Now, scholars tell us that, of course, there's husn al-khuluq, there's beautiful dealings towards Allah, there's beautiful and respectful dealings towards the Prophet ﷺ. Those two are very, very important and very crucial, and they deserve their own time to be understood and learned. But in this time, I wanted to focus on the third branch of husn al-khuluq, or beautiful character and dealings, which is our dealings towards other people. So this idea of beautiful behavior might be kind of vague or fuzzy. What's something that we can take and actually understand what's being talked about here. So one of the great scholars of the 20th century, Sheikh Ashraf Ali Thanwi, he tells us that the reality of noble character is that we must not cause any form of difficulty or inconvenience to anyone, neither outwardly nor inwardly, in their presence or in their absence. SubhanAllah, this definition is so profound that it's kind of being conscious and thinking about, am I being a source of difficulty or frustration for someone? First of all, if I'm in front of them, they might show it, or they might be polite and not show it. And even in that case, we should still be thinking about, am I a source of discomfort or inconvenience to the people around me? Or also in their absence, when they're not there. Maybe I do something that will bother someone, but it won't be in the moment, it'll be later on. So as believers, we should be thinking about that as well. And Abdullah bin Mubarak, one of the great scholars of our past and studied from many of the tabi'een, he tells us that husnul khuluq is essentially three things. Kaful adha, والصبر على الأذى وطلاقة الوجه. The kaful adha, first of all, is not doing harm, not doing things that bother other people. Another important component is والصبر على الأذى. That when people treat you badly or rudely or in a way that irritates you and bothers you, having sabr. So that could, for one thing, just mean like staying composed, but also if you are used to dealing with people in a beautiful way or in a good way, keeping that up, because sabr also means to stick to something and to be consistent. So holding back from like reacting when people treat us negatively or harshly. And the third aspect he mentions is talaqatul wajh, that meeting people with a welcoming face, just a face that's pleasant, that shows that you're like pleased to meet them and that you're happy to see them. More about how important this is, these three aspects that seem simple, but SubhanAllah, our scholars tell us that good character is one of the most neglected paths to paradise. And it doesn't look like an act of worship on the outside. It doesn't look the same as reading extensive Quran and spending a lot of time praying in the night alone with Allah. Those are beautiful and incredible things that we should be striving for. But good character is something that doesn't look the same, but the Prophet ﷺ tells us that so many people on the Day of Judgment will enter Jannah largely based on that. One of our great scholars of Usul and a scholar of Fiqh, Imam al-Qarafi, says in one of his books, he quotes another scholar who tells his son that, "Oh my son, let your actions be like salt and your adab like flour." If you ever made dough or like made some kind of pastry or something like that, you know that there's a ton of flour compared to just a little bit of salt. And so the scholar is giving his son this advice. He's saying that however much you're doing in terms of acts of worship and these kind of beautiful things, keep that up. But that compared to your adab, compared to the way you treat other people, should be like a pinch compared to like many cups of flour. And the Prophet ﷺ himself tells us in a beautiful hadith that's narrated by Abu Darda. He said, "ما شيء أثقل في ميزان المؤمن يوم القيامة من خلق حسن وإن الله لا يبغض الفاحش البذيء." The Prophet ﷺ tells us that nothing is heavier on the believer's scale on the Day of Judgment than good character, and Allah the Most High is angered by people who are shameless and people who are obscene, and is kind of always putting people around them at discomfort. Part of the beautiful thing about our tradition, the stories that we have from our Prophet ﷺ and from the pious generations that came before us, is that we see so many good examples for any kind of beautiful trait we want to emulate. So when we look at this first aspect of beautiful character, about when people treat you negatively, when people treat you harshly, having a beautiful response, we see that there's no shortage of examples of this in our past. The first story I wanted to share with you is about Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And for some context, this is the man who our scholars consider to be the fifth of the rightly guided caliphs, and this is someone whose impact on the ummah was so incredible that by the end of his reign, the people who collected zakat would go around asking, is there anybody who needs to take zakat so they can meet their basic needs? And because of his justice and because of his fear of Allah and because of the way he ruled, subhanAllah, these people who they'd go out, they'd say, does anybody need money to meet their basic needs, to live a decent life? They'd go out and they wouldn't find anybody who was in need of that. That's how great and how pious this man was. May Allah have mercy on him. And so it's narrated that once he was walking in Masjid al-Nabawi at night with some of his companions. Of course, back then they didn't have the lighting we do now, so It was probably dimly lit with maybe some candles. And so he's walking at night in the masjid and he accidentally steps on the leg of a man who's sleeping. So the man who's sleeping, he gets up, he's very startled, he's very annoyed, and he tells, of course he doesn't see who he's talking to, perhaps. So his first response, he tells Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, this great caliph of the Muslims, he tells him, "Amajnoon ant? Like, are you crazy? What's wrong with you? How are you stepping on me? You don't see I'm sleeping here?" Like, he's just very, very rude and abrupt response. And Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, his response, all he says, "La lastu bi majnoon," and he continues walking. The man asked him, "Are you crazy? Like, what's wrong with you?" The Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he just said, "No, I'm not crazy," and he just kept going. So that shows us the beauty of his response, that instead of acting like, "Who are you? Like, you're just some person sleeping in the masjid. Like, how could you talk this way to me? I'm the grand leader of the Muslims." Instead of having that attitude, he just responds beautifully and just keeps going. He doesn't let that throw him off and doesn't let it affect the beautiful way that he deals with those around him. And we have another beautiful example in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. There are so many more, but just one that we can take and reflect on. While the Prophet ﷺ was still in Mecca, so there was an old lady who lived kind of far from the city, and she would come into Mecca every once in a while to get her groceries and then come back. So this old lady, she had never met the Prophet ﷺ, but she heard all of the rumors that were spread about him, that he's just splitting up Quraysh and he's doing all these terrible things to our people, and so she had a lot of hate for the Prophet ﷺ. So one day she comes to Mecca and she gets her groceries and she gets her stuff, and there's a lot of heavy bags, and she's a very old lady. So she's kind of struggling to carry it, and she's asking people that she sees, "Can you help me carry this back to my hometown? I'll even have an offering to pay you for it." And people were like, "No, that's too far. It's hot outside. We're not willing to do that." And so the Prophet ﷺ saw her, and he saw how she was struggling, and so he came and he offered to help. He said, "Can I help you carry this back?" And she was very appreciative, and they walked together all the way back to her village. And then after he drops off her groceries after this long, long, hot commute, she tells him that, "Look, I'm a poor lady, I don't have much, but I can give you a very valuable piece of advice." And so the Prophet ﷺ says, "Hati ma indik." Share whatever you have to say, please, I'd love to hear it. So this old lady says, "There's this man in Mecca named Muhammad who claims that he's a messenger of Allah. And don't believe that guy, he's a liar, he's a magician, and don't follow him, he's gonna try to trick you." So just imagine this scenario that you've done a favor like this for someone. You've walked their heavy groceries so far in the heat, and they're not paying you for it, and after all that, this person, this lady, insults the Prophet ﷺ to his own face, calling him a liar and a magician and fake, and nobody should listen to you. How frustrating would that be, and how irritating could that be? I could see myself responding something like, at least even if you don't know who I am, just like don't say something like that. That's so harsh and so evil. And we could have had this we could have seen this response from the Prophet ﷺ, but instead his reply, all he says is, he said, "What if I told you if I am Muhammad, I am that man you're talking about?" That's all he said. No need to argue with her and you don't know who I am. None of that. All he says is, "What if I told you that I am the person that you're talking so negatively about?" So subhanAllah, she's just completely at a loss. How can you respond to something like that? And she said that, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu annaka rasulullah." She just says that a person who does a favor like this for someone and then gets insulted to his own face and still has the dignity to respond like that, there's no way that these lies that are being spread about the Prophet ﷺ, there's no way those are true, and she believes in him right away. So we see that the Prophet ﷺ and these great men and women from our past, they had great forbearance and great helm for the misconduct of others. So this is the first important piece of husnul khuluq, that when we experience rudeness or vulgarity, that we respond beautifully and peacefully. There's a beautiful couplet by Imam al-Shafi'i where he says, "يخاطبني السفيه بكل قبح فأكره أن أكون له مجيبا يزيد سفاهة فأزيد حلما كعود زاده الإحراق طيبا." Where he says that the foolish person speaks to me in a very vile and ugly manner, and I would hate, Imam al-Shafi'i is saying, I'd hate to respond to him in the same way. So he says that this person, he's becoming more and more animosity, and he's becoming more and more rude in his speech. So Imam Shafi'i says, so I increase in my forbearance like incense, that when you burn it, it only smells sweeter. And so this is a beautiful example we can remember about this first aspect of beautiful character. When people treat us rudely or in a way that's not befitting, remember that example of incense, that it smells nice when it's just sitting there in the package, but when you burn it, that's when it smells even more beautiful. And the thing is though, the Prophet ﷺ told us that أكمل المؤمنين إيمانا أحسنهم خلقا وخياركم خياركم لنسائهم. And these two examples tell us about times when the Prophet ﷺ and Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, they showed beautiful character towards people they might have not known. But the Prophet ﷺ tells us that the most complete of the believers in their faith are the ones with the best character. And he says the best of you are those who are the best to your wives and your spouses. Well, scholars say that this narration is talking about how having beautiful manners with the people you're closest to. In this case, he's talking about spouses. That's what's very, very important, and that's a real test. Because many of us, we're capable of treating people well and politely when we're out or with our friends or when we're at work. Say that, we don't want non-Muslims to have a bad image of Islam. But when we come home, when we're dealing with our family, with our parents, with our children, with our siblings, we feel like that responsibility of treating them well like that just kind of vanishes. That we're at home now, that we can relax and we don't have to worry about dealing with that kind of adab. So this is what I'd like to focus on with our short time left today, that when we're home, how do we treat our spouse and our children and our parents? Because ultimately, how our khuluq, how our manners manifest at home, that's something that's critical. So the first aspect of beautiful character, that when people treat you rudely or harshly, maybe your spouse or your sibling is upset or something's bothering them, so they do something that irritates you. And the thing is, your family and the people who you're closest to, they know how to irritate you better than anybody else. All right, somebody else might, while you're driving, you might get cut off, and maybe that doesn't bother you that much. But your siblings or your spouse, they might know the things that really bother you. So it may happen that one day they're upset and they're frustrated, and they do something that they know bothers you. Right? So that's when we have to remember this example of the Prophet ﷺ and this example of this incense, that when it's burned, it only smells more and more beautiful. The second aspect of beautiful character that Abdullah Mubarak identifies is greeting people with a pleasant, beautiful face. Again, this is something that it's easy to be excited or thrilled when we're going out to see our friends or when we're seeing someone we're really close to at work, but do we have that same attitude when we come home, when we see our spouse or our children we haven't seen all day? The Prophet ﷺ gives us such a beautiful example of this, where it's narrated that when Fatima, his daughter, would enter a room, the Prophet ﷺ would stand up from where he was sitting, he would come over and kiss her and lead her to sit in the place where he was sitting. And it's even more beautiful that Fatima anha, she would do the same for her father, for the Prophet ﷺ. So it shows that this kind of adab, this kind of beautiful behavior in the home, it rubs off on those who are around us. So this just shows us such a beautiful example of having a welcoming face and a welcoming attitude when we see our family. Imagine how your son or your daughter or your spouse would feel if you greeted them like that when they came home. Even if you have bad news to share or you're really upset with your child for something that they did, imagine if you gave them this kind of warm and caring greeting first, and then you shared whatever you need to talk to them about. Imagine how differently that would be perceived. So inshallah, we can try and follow the Prophet ﷺ's example in demonstrating this kind of excitement to see our family and see those who are closest to us. Finally, the last aspect of having beautiful character is kaful adha, of not doing harm. Now, we might think to ourselves that we don't really inshallah, we don't have malicious intentions towards our family. We don't do big evil things or big things that really, really bother them. But the thing is that husn al-khuluq, having beautiful character, this thing that the Prophet ﷺ praises so much, is about paying attention to the small stuff too. Because relationship experts talk about the example of any relationship you have with someone, it can be thought of as a tank. Like a fuel tank, that when you do things they enjoy, when you do things that please them, it's like you're filling the tank. When you do things that bother them or things that irritate them, you're draining the tank. And when the tank is empty, then something that might seem very, very small you might do something that bothers them, and then all of a sudden their reaction is huge, and you feel like, what's going on? I did something so small, like why are you overreacting? That could be because that tank has been draining. And when you think about a tank, right, even if you poke a small hole in it, give it enough time and that tank will drain. And our family members are people we're interacting with all the time. So we should do our best to try and pay attention to small things too. Just simple examples that, again, they might seem small, but these are things that can have an impact on our families. First, for example, if we enjoy a cup of tea after dinner or something like that, and we just set our cup down somewhere, is our attitude that I want to take care of this and like take it and wash it so that nobody else has to come after and clean it up? Or do we just leave it and assume that somebody else will take care of it and kind of maybe do something that might irritate our spouse or our younger sibling who always gets asked to clean up? Another small thing that, again, small things you might not think about, but things that can have an impact, right, is when you're using the restroom and you see that the toilet paper roll is empty, or you use the last piece and now it's empty, right? You have a decision. You can either leave it so the next person comes and they're bothered and irritated that they have to go and get a new roll and put it, or you can try and practice this not causing harm to other people and not bothering them by saying, you know what, I'll go out of my way, I'll go get a new roll and put it there so the next person doesn't have to deal with it. And these things especially are tricky because technically you can't really point at a rule and saying that you're doing this wrong or you're not following this or this is haram, or we can't apply that kind of logic with this stuff because it's small. But these are things that are important for us to have beautiful character with our families. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Everyone can just scoot up a little bit to make space for our brothers, inshallah. We've been talking about beautiful character towards other people and having a good disposition. And we talked about how Abdullah bin Mubarak, one of our great scholars of our Salaf, laid out a beautiful definition that can help us remember when we're talking about beautiful character. What does that mean? First of all, we want to be firm and patient in treating people beautifully when they treat us negatively. Like the example of incense, that when you burn it, it only smells more and more sweet. Secondly, that when we meet people, when we see our families coming, in particular, that we greet them in a welcoming way, in a pleasant way that makes them feel that we're excited to see them. And finally, to avoid causing harm to other people, especially to our family, whether it's like small things that we might not pay attention to, or bigger things that we know irritate them. One last point I wanted to mention here was about conversation, because this is obviously we talk to people all the time, and the Prophet ﷺ has given us some beautiful guidance on this aspect as well. Where it's narrated by Jabir radiallahu anhu that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ مِنْ أَحَبَّكُمْ إِلَيْهِ وَأَقْرَبَكُمْ مِنِّي مَجْلِسًا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَحَاسِنُكُمْ أَخْلَاقًا. So first he tells us that the dearest and the nearest among you to me on the day of resurrection will be those who have the most beautiful character. So subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that good manners, first of all, is something that makes you a more pleasant person to be around in this world. But on top of that, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that that's something that will bring us closer and closer to him on the Day of Judgment, and that's something that all of us should wish for. But the Prophet ﷺ continues and he says, وَإِنَّ أَبْغَضَكُمْ إِلَيْهِ وَأَبْعَدَكُمْ مِنِّي يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ الثَّرْثَارُونَ وَالْمُتَشَدِّقُونَ وَالْمُتَفَيْهِقُونَ رواه الترمذي. So the Prophet ﷺ also tells us that the most abhorrent among you to me, or like those whom I will not be close to on the Day of Judgment, are these three types of people. And we'll elaborate on them briefly. So first of all, the Prophet ﷺ mentions الثَّرْثَارُونَ. So this is an interesting word that means something along the lines of, like, we all know people who, inshallah, we're not among them, but when you're in conversation with them, it's like they take up the whole conversation. Like they're just always looking for a chance to talk, and they're like talking over other people. This isn't talking about, some people by their disposition, they're just more bubbly and they love to talk, and that's beautiful, but this is talking about someone who's like, always wants to dominate the conversation, and always have the last word, and always kind of speak their mind even when it's not the time to do that. So the Prophet ﷺ says that those people, like, be aware of being among those people, it won't be good for you in the afterlife. Then the Prophet ﷺ tells us that he tells us about al-mutashaddiqun. And this is talking about people who talk as if they are like so eloquent. And we shouldn't mistake this with the fact that the Prophet ﷺ, his language was beautiful. And Imam Shafi'i, his Arabic was so beautiful, even people who didn't care about religion would come to listen to him. And people would say, why are you here? They say, because his Arabic is just so, his language is so beautiful and eloquent, like the way he speaks, it sounds so nice. And so, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about examples where you're sitting in a gathering and you're just using language that you know is well above the level of everyone else who was there, just because you want to sound smart or sound impressive. And as a student, I can tell you that I see this all the time. You see students who, they just throw around words they don't understand, vocabulary, because they want to sound smart to the teacher, and they want to impress the other students. Everybody knows that they're being fake or insincere. So those are people that, other people don't enjoy being around them. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us that this is something that's not good for you on the Day of Judgment. And finally, the Prophet ﷺ warns us about mutashaddiqun, people who talk as if, or the mutafayyiqun, people who are arrogant and who see themselves as better than others and who look down on others in conversation. So hopefully these are some etiquettes and manners that we can take and try and be conscious of in conversation. Ultimately, people typically learn manners growing up in their families, but for many of us, maybe we didn't have the opportunity to learn this kind of adab and beautiful character from our parents or from our families. So this is something that's going to require a lot of humility. We're going to have to be willing to listen to people, whether they're maybe friends or coworkers or parents or siblings, who tell us that, this thing you do, it really bothers people. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but you should work on it. You have to have the humility that when we hear that from someone, to say that, Jazakallah khair, I appreciate that advice and I'll do my best to work on it. And learning adab is not easy. We have to pay attention to our surroundings and be on the lookout for people who have beautiful character and learn from them. And also keep an eye out for people who have very bad character and learn from them too to not do what they do. So, and this may seem difficult, it may seem like a struggle, but at the end of the day, it is worth it, because the Prophet ﷺ tells us, إِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيَبْلُغُ بِحُسْنِ خُلُقِهِ دَرَجَةَ الصَّائِمِ الْقَائِمِ. Now we've just left this month of Ramadan where perhaps we felt inspired to do a lot more fasting and a lot more prayer than we typically do. And now if we feel like that's wearing off, inshallah, that's something we can try to keep up, even if it's a little bit. But the Prophet ﷺ tells us that a person has the potential to reach the station of someone who's regularly fasting and regularly praying if they can perfect and really work on having beautiful character with other people. So, inshallah, we can, at least for one thing, just try and take this and ask a sibling or a parent or a spouse or a close friend about one thing that we do that bothers them, that maybe they haven't told us about, or maybe they've just kept quiet because they don't want to make us angry or something like that. Just ask for some advice, that how can I improve my character? I want to do this for the sake of Allah. I promise I won't get mad when you tell me. And just take that so that we can improve our character a little bit at a time. And second of all, to remember these etiquettes of conversation. That when we're in conversation, just beware of kind of always talking over other people. If you're talking to someone and they're speaking and something pops into your head, there's no need to say it right away. You can just wait and listen, make them feel heard. After they're done talking, then you can reply, and inshallah, that way you can all be more pleasant believers and closer to Allah and to the Prophet ﷺ on the Day of Judgment. I challenge myself and all of you to carry ourselves with character and to be dignified Muslims who proudly carry this beautiful religion. We ask that Allah make us people of beautiful character, help us to be a source of relief and joy for those around us, and not a source of inconvenience and frustration. Allah give us the strength to treat our families as well as beautifully as we treat our friends. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا